Welcome back to my channel. This is the fourth video in a new series on how to design a PRS guitar in Fusion 360. In this video, I'm going to create the headstock and do the transition between the neck and the headstock. If you want to see more PRS design build videos, click on subscribe. And if you like it, give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Fusion files from this series, check out my Patreon site, which is listed below. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to start by doing a quick timeline review of what we're going to cover in this episode. So this is the state of the model of the guitar neck as it stands at the end of the last video. So the first thing we're going to do here is create a few construction planes. And this one I created at fret 0, or basically the start of the nut. And then I did an offset by the nut width to get what I call a nut line, which is the other side of the nut. And then we're going to do an offset faces to that second construction plane. Let me hide F0 here. Then we're going to do a construction plane at a 10-degree angle from this point. And that's going to be the angle of our headstock. Then what I did is I actually brought in a photo of my guitar to define the headstock. And I've got a ruler on it so that we can calibrate it. Then I did a sketch around that. Let me hide the canvas and you can see the sketch, the outline of the headstock. Then part of it got extruded because this part is not part of the transition between the neck and the headstock, but this part is, so I didn't bother to extrude that part because it's going to get created when we do the transition. Next up, I created, I calculated the point where I estimated that the transition goes back to on the neck, so that anything this side is not affected, but on this side there is going to be a transition, so we need to cut this part of the neck away. Let me get rid of a couple of these excess planes here. I'll hide the headstock and I'll hide my nut line. This is the transition point. So we want to cut away that neck. So this is a split bodies right there, and then I'm erasing several parts of that body. I still want this top piece because this is unaffected by the transition. Then we're going to do a patch to fill in that area, and then a sketch here which kind of divides up this face so that we have various points that we can do splines to do the transition. And I'm actually using several planes here to do a split face. And then that's the third plane, and then that face is split. Moving along here, this is probably the most important sketch. This defines the transition from these 2 points on the headstock back to the neck. And then I'm actually going to do a loft. Let's see, we're not seeing that, I think, because the bodies are hidden. Yep. Okay, so we did a loft on that side, and then same thing, this body was hidden. A loft on this side. Let me hide the construction planes so you can see that a little bit better. And then a patch. Again, that body was hidden. Okay, so this area got patched in, and then this area gets patched in. And then it's really just a matter of stitching stuff together, but you've got to delete the appropriate faces in order to make the stitch work. And then the final operation is really going to be a cap on the headstock. So I defined yet another construction plane. This one I was calling Headstock Cap, which, if I hide the rest of these, we can see that. So that's 1/8 of an inch down from the top of the headstock. I split to get a couple of bodies there, but there's an extra piece right here that's got to get combined back with the neck. And here's a second split, which is the vertical split. and then combining the pieces back together. Let's hide the construction plane, and that's our, oops, sorry about that, that's our finished part right there. So now I'll go into the details on how to do all that stuff. So let's first rewind the timeline back to the end of the previous video, and I'm just going to click and shift click and delete all of these features here, which will take us back to that point in time. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to get our scale back up on the screen. And this is the start of the nut, which I call F0, fret number 0. So I'm going to create a construction plane there, but I want to do that inside my neck, so I'm going to activate my neck component. And I've got my construction folder open and visible. Let me collapse these two so we can see it a little better. Okay, so I'm inside my neck. I click on this fret 0 position in my scale sketch and go up to plane at angle and then set that to 90 degrees. And now I've got a perpendicular plane. Okay, and let's go ahead and name that. So that becomes F0. And now I want to do an offset plane. Doing some measurements on my PRS guitar, it looks like it's a 1/4 of an inch from the start of the nut to where the neck starts to angle off at 10 degrees. So I'm going to do an offset plane here, and I've already selected F0 plane, so I'll just pull this and type in 0.25 and press enter. And then I call this the nut line. I'm not sure exactly what this should be called, but that's what I've always called it. So this is so basically these two planes are the two sides of the nut. These two guys here. And the nut width is essentially a 1/4 of an inch here. Okay, so now we don't really need F0, so I'm going to hide that. And we're going to do an offset. Let me go also hide the scale. Okay, so we're going to do offset faces. So in our solid tab, we'll go to offset face, pick this as the face, and then pick the nut line construction plane is where we're going to. And click enter. So now the tapering got, you don't want to do an extrude there because you wouldn't get this continuous tapering. You want to do an offset face. Okay, so now we don't need that construction plane anymore, so I'll hide that. But I want another one at a 10-degree angle. So I'm going to do another plane at angle, and this time I can just hover over this line. And now I'll show you the thing that I think is a bug in Fusion. But if I do 10 degrees here and press enter, after I press enter, it gives me the opposite angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in my timeline, right click, do an edit feature, and that looks right now, but once you press enter, it's going to flip it to the other direction. So I'm going to put minus 10 degrees here. And now after you press enter, it looks correct. So that's the plane that we're going to draw our headstock on. I'm just clicking over the sides of this construction plane to make it a little bit bigger to kind of represent what we're doing here. Okay, so I couldn't find a really good plan that had an accurate PRS headstock, so I took a picture of mine, and we're going to insert that canvas on this plane. But first, let's go ahead and rename the construction plane. So I'll call that headstock. Okay, so now let's see, we will do an insert, and I've got some photos here that I've uploaded, and the one that I want is the headstock JPEG. So I'm going to insert that onto this face, and I'll just do an OK. And you'll see that what I've done here when I took this photo is I actually put a small ruler on it specifically so that I can calibrate this photo to the proper size. So that's the first thing I want to do. I'm going to open up my Canvas folder, and in my headstock I'm going to right click and do a calibrate. Now when I calibrate, I want to look straight at this. So if I select, let's see, can I do this at this point? I think I might have to get out of the calibrate mode. Okay, so I'm selecting the construction plane and I want to do a look at. That now is a straight on view of that headstock construction plane that's at a 10-degree angle. Okay, so I can hide the construction plane and it's still selected, so I'm going to click outside of it. All right, so now I can do a calibrate. So I'm going to right click on my Headstock Canvas, go to calibrate, and then I might as well use this full ruler, which is 6 inches. So I'm going to pick here, kind of the middle of the ruler, and right here, and then type in 6 and enter. And now that gets sized properly. So now all I have to do is position that in the right spot. We can kind of see where I put this ruler. It's right at the what I call the nut line. So I want to position that to the proper spot. And let's see. So we want to go back to our headstock and do an edit canvas. And now we're able to move it around. Little tough to see here, so I'm going to set the opacity down on this. Okay, now we can see the picture and we can see the body below it. And you can see I'm nowhere close here. So I want to move this down. And over. So you can see it's a little bit of a tedious process here. If I zoom in, we can see we're getting close here. All right. So what I want is the start of this ruler, which is the what we call a nut line, to align to this line right here. So I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit to get my arrows here. And I'm going to move this down just so that that ruler touches right there. And now you can see that the headstock sort of corresponds with the width of the neck there. I'm just going to try to get it centered as best I can. Right about there. Okay. So now that we have that calibrated and positioned properly, we can draw a sketch on that same construction plane. So let's go ahead and turn that construction plane on so that we can pre-select it and then go to our create sketch, and that's now in the proper plane. Okay, so now we can turn our construction plane off for a little bit better viewing. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to start with splines. I'm going to make sure that I intersect with the neck, but you can see there's no intersection happening there. So I'm going to have to project at least a couple of points in. So I'm going to hit P for project, and I'm going to go to this point, and then click on OK. That's really, I think, all I need at this point. So I'm going to go to my spline. I'm able to intersect with the neck. And I'm going to go halfway on the curve here and click, and then to this point. And kind of do the same thing here, halfway on the curve, and then to the point. And repeat that process here. And you can see it sort of takes shape as you go. Okay, so we've got the spline all the way around, and now I'm going to do a line from this point to close the profile in. Okay, so now the first thing I like to do is to set tangency. So basically this curve is going to be tangent to this line, but I think we're going to need to project that line and that line into our sketch. So let's do a P. And I'm going to click on this line and this line and project those two guys in. And I'm going to go ahead and make these construction. So I'm clicking on the lines and pressing X. So those are construction lines now. Okay, so the purpose of these two lines is to set tangency here. So let's go ahead and click on our spline curve and the tangent constraint and this line. And you can see that kind of straighten things out there. And I'll do the same on this side. Okay, so now we have tangency on both, and now we can go ahead and modify our handles and try to get this to look a little bit better. I kind of like to start by moving points around. You know, if this point is not quite in the middle of the curve, I might, change that position. But now if I click on the curve, I've got these handles that I can change the angle of, and I can change the length of, and easier to do it than describe it. Not really possible in my mind to describe how to do this. You've just got to kind of experiment with it and see if you can get something that comes close. And realize that you're changing two sides of the curve at once, which is frustrating. So sometimes you have to continually go back and forth. Oops, I got the point there instead of the handles. So anyway, I'm gonna fast forward this recording so that you don't have to watch me do this whole thing. But you can see that we're actually pretty close here. And don't forget that even with these tangent handles, you can't change the angle, but you can change the length of them, so they can be modified to help you get your final shape here. But anyway, I will come back in a second after I've got this to my liking, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've spent a few minutes, and I've got a series of curves here that I like. Seems to conform pretty well to my photo. I'm going to look at it without the photo to make sure I like the profile, but that looks good. So we're still in the sketch here. I'm going to get my line tool, and I'm going to draw a line from here to here, essentially creating two profiles that you'll see when I get out of the sketch. And the purpose of those two profiles is that one of these, this major part, is going to get extruded straight down because that's not involved in the transition to the neck. The second is just going to get patched as a flat surface right here. And then the transition will handle the rest of this. So while we're here, we might as well go ahead and extrude this portion down. And our thickness here is 0.625. So I'm going to type in negative 0.625, enter. Okay, so we've created a solid body there. The next thing we want to do is identify the point where this transition starts on the neck. And when I measured it on my guitar, it looks like it's about a ½ inch back from this nut line. So we're going to do another construction plane. Let's go to our solid tab here and go to construct, and this time an offset from this neckline right here. And we're going to go back. I'm getting a warning now because I've got my construction folder hidden, so I'm going to unhide that. And also let's scroll up in our browser here and hide some of these planes we don't need. Okay, so I'm going to type in minus 0.5. So this plane, let's just make sure, this plane is back ½ an inch from the nut line, and I'll go ahead and make this a lot smaller here so we don't get confused by it. And then I also like to name my planes right after I do them. So this is going to be my trans start. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this as a cutting surface to cut the neck body. So we'll do a split body, pick the neck, and we've already pre-selected that plane, so that's our splitting tool. All right, so now I can hide the construction planes. Now, instead of simply just deleting this new body, and then we'll go up to our bodies here and we can see what got created here. We have 3 solid bodies right now. We have that one that we just cut, we have that headstock, and then we have the remainder of the neck. Now, it's tempting just to delete this piece altogether or remove it. But I actually want the top of it. So I'm going to go to the Surface tab, and I'm going to just click on Surfaces here and hit my Delete key. And you can see there's yet another surface right here. I'm going to delete that too. So we still have a solid here, and now we have a surface body right here that I can hide and show. Here's our headstock, and there's our neck. Okay, so now we want to work on this neck to identify some points that we can do a spline from here to here and start this transition going. Another thing we can do is fill in, if we get our sketch back, our headstock sketch, we can fill this in or patch that. So I think I'm going to do that first. I've got the profile selected. I'll go up to my patch tool and then hit enter. And now we have another surface body. We have one there and one there. Okay. So I can hide my headstock sketch. And so I kind of identified, looking at my neck, that there were some transition points here, you know, basically off of the center. I want to come 3/8 of an inch in each direction towards the outside to define a point that I can then go from here to this point on the headstock to do the transition. So I'm going to actually start to cut this face here in order to get those points where I can do that. So I'm going to set up planes in order to cut this face. One of the planes I'm going to use is the origin. So let's see if we can get the neck origin in view here. There it is. Okay. So this plane is right down the middle. So that's going to be one of our cutting surfaces, and then we're going to do offset planes from that. So I'm going to click on this plane here. I'm getting a warning because my construction folder is hidden. Now I unhid it, and let's see. Oh, let's kill that. So we want to do an offset plane from this plane, and we want to come in this direction 3/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to hide the origin just so I can see what I just did. I'll go ahead and name this split 1. So this is 3/8 of an inch off center. It's going to be splitting this face way down here, so I'm just going to click on the edges of that plane, and you can actually move those planes around. Okay, so the second plane is going to be 3/8 of an inch from center, or 3/4 of an inch from this plane. So I'm just going to do an offset from this guy. So I'll click on offset plane, and this time we're coming in a negative direction. So this will be negative 0.75, and I'll name this split 2. Okay. So now we're going to do the split, but I'm going to use that origin plane as the center split as well. So let's go to split face, select the face we want to split. Let's kill all our splitting tools. The first one I'm going to get is this one from the origin. So that's right down the middle, and then our two other splitting surfaces. So you can see I've got 3 splits going on that face at once. And let's go ahead and do it. All right, so now we've got a point here. Let me hide the construction planes. A point here in the center and here. And if I did this right, let's go ahead and inspect. From here to here should be 3/8 of an inch, which it is. And from here to here is also 3/8. Great. All right. Now we also want to split this face while we're at it, and I can't get a midline here because this is kind of an asymmetric thing, but I can use that mid plane, that origin plane, to split this face. So I'll pre-select, I'll go to split face, and then we want to turn the origin back on. There it is, and use this plane right here. as our splitting tool. Oops, I got to go to splitting tool in the dialog box first. Okay, there it is. Okay, so now we split that face too. So now we've got points here, 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 and these three here. Those are going to allow us to do the most important sketch in this segment, which is going to kind of define this whole transition. So this is going to be a 3D sketch, so it really doesn't matter what plane you start this sketch on, but I'm going to go ahead and start it right here. And I'm going to make sure that 3D sketch is checked here in my sketch palette, and go up to spline, and I'm going to start at this point, make sure I'm intersecting there, and then go to this point, again confirming intersection before I do anything. And again, since this is asymmetric, I've got to do this, I can't mirror it, and in fact I haven't had success in mirroring 3D sketches anyway, so we've got to do this on both sides. Now you can see we don't have a very nice transition from the headstock to the neck, but if we were to make this line tangent to the length of the neck, we would have a nice transition. So I'm going to get my line tool, and I'm just going to draw from that point intersecting and go straight along the neck here and type in 90 degrees to make sure that I'm going straight on the neck. I'm going to set this length to 0.5, but that really doesn't matter. I'll click on it, do an X for construction geometry, and now you'll see why I did this. So tangent, pick this spline, this line, and now we've got a nice transition. And let's do the same on the other side. So I'm going to get the line tool. We're going to intersect at this point, and then make sure that this is set to 90 degrees. I'm going to set this to 1/2 inch. I will click on this and hit X to make that construction geometry, and then go up to our tangent constraint. Click on the spline. I had already pre-selected this line, so now we've got that beautiful sweep, and you know, you can kind of see now the geometry is mostly defined here. But we also want a nice smooth transition along the center line here. So one more spline will do that, and we probably have to set tangency on that too. So here's the start of our spline. We're going to go up to this point, make sure we intersect there, click on the check mark, and so initially that's just a straight line. So we're going to do the same trick here. We'll get another line, make it construction geometry, pull this back, and make sure I'm hitting tab here to go to 90 degrees, tab again to go to 0.5, and now our tangency constraint between the spline and the little helper line. And now if we look at this from the side, you can see this is the center line that we just did. So there's a nice transition in 3 dimensions basically. Okay, so now it's just a matter of filling in the blanks, doing patching and lofting to finish this transition. So let's finish the sketch. And now I'm going to go to the Surface tab, and we want to do a surface loft. So I'll pick that. Here's our first profile and our second profile. And then I'll go down to the rails section here, hit plus, and pick the neck and the edge of the headstock here as our 2 rails to direct that loft. And I'll do an OK. Now we should be able to fill this area in with a patch. So let's go to the patch tool. Let's make sure that enable chaining is turned off so that we can select these 5 individual edges. And I'm just clicking on these 5 edges. And there's our preview. When we do OK, we've got a nice transition there. So basically, if we turn the sketch back on, we can do the same thing on the other side. Again, we're going to do a surface loft from this profile to this profile. We're going to add 2 rails, our neck, and our headstock, and do an OK, and then a patch down here. So you can see the actual filling in is pretty straightforward as long as you're totally set up to do it. And there's our new body. Okay. So now let's take a look and see what we have for bodies here. Let's start with the solid body. So I'm going to hide everything else. I'm going to hide all these orange surface bodies. And I'll go ahead and hide our sketches and collapse things up a little bit. Okay. So we've got one solid body, which is the headstock here. That's not going to mesh well with these surface bodies. These surfaces have to be removed in order to successfully stitch. So I'm going to shift click and shift click on two of them, hit my delete key. This only works if you're in the surfacing tab, by the way. Now that body is also a surface body. So let's turn on some of the other surface bodies and make sure that they are ready for joining too. So you wouldn't want a surface right here. It wouldn't join properly. Okay, so those two look fine. That one looks fine. Now this came in. This could be a problem here. Let's see. Which was the body? Okay, it was this one. So let's go back just to this body. Nope. Yes, okay. So now I've got two bodies enabled here, and these surfaces are going to have to go away. So I'm going to click and shift click on those four surfaces and take those away. And now I think everything is set up to go. Let's just confirm that. I'm just making each one of these surface bodies visible, making sure that there's no essentially inner surfaces that would stop this from getting stitched together. Okay. So now we've got a bunch of hollow surfaces that we should be able to stitch. So I'm going to select everything. See, that selected all of the surface bodies here. And then go to Stitch and OK. And now we have a single solid body. So we can go back to our Solid tab. And the next step is to create our head cap. So I want to create a cap on this headstock that's 1/8 of an inch thick. So basically removing 1/8 of an inch and adding a body to it. So I think the easiest way to do this is a couple of splits of this solid body. So we can start off with an offset plane. Click on the headstock itself, pull this plane down, and let's see, we were going to do what, 1/8 of an inch there, so minus 1.125. Okay, so now if we show our construction planes, we have this new construction plane here, and let's go ahead and name that, and also hide any of the other ones that we don't need. Okay, here's our new one, and this is HS Cap for Headstock Cap. Okay, so you can see if we split with this, we're going to end up splitting part of the neck too, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and join that back in later. So let's do a split body. The body we want to split is this entire neck. Our splitting tool was already pre-selected, but if it wasn't, we could just click on this construction plane that we just made and go ahead and split that. Now we can hide the construction plane, HS Cap, and let's look at our bodies and see what we have. So we have a body here, which goes too far, and then this. So it's not exactly the cap we want. We also want to split it right here. Okay, so let's see what we've got for that. That should be the nut line. Okay, which it is. So now if we do a split using this nut line construction plane, and what we're going to split is this body right here with this splitting tool. Oops. With this splitting tool. Okay. So now we're ending up with 3 bodies, which is good. Let's see. So there's this body, so that's our headstock cap. So let's go ahead and rename that to cap. so we know what's going on. And then these two bodies, basically if we hide the cap and hide our construction plane, you can see we just want to join those two guys together. So let's do a combine and set this up as a join. Our target body, doesn't matter, one of those two. Our tool body is the other one. We don't want to keep our tools. We want one of those bodies to go away after the join. So we click, and now we have two bodies. So I'm going to rename this one to neck. And now we have a neck and a cap. And we can further accentuate that if you press A for appearance. Pop up our appearances. I've already got walnut set up in my appearances here. So I'm going to drag that to the cap and close, and then there is our walnut cap. So that is our neck with a headstock and with a smooth transition.